Hey everybody, welcome back to the next part of my dialing in series. Today I'm taking a look at dialing in the Gray Flanger, or the MXR 117 flanger. This is a pretty famous flanger pedal, and I figured I would pick this, but also give kind of a general overview of how a flanger works. I think, again, when we're dialing in specific effects, this is not going to be so much about me saying, here's the settings you should be using. It's more about understanding what each setting is. Sometimes the way the settings are labeled is not clear sort of in real world terms, if that makes sense. It doesn't give us exactly what it's doing. So when we understand them, I think it's going to help us to be able to dial in what we need, whether it's, some particular maybe drastic effect we're looking for. We just don't know how to get there, okay? So first of all, what is a flanger? Well, if anybody's watched my dialing in video about the chorus, I would kind of say that flanger and chorus are like maybe, generally related or a similar type of an effect. And if you remember what I said about the chorus, basically these modulation effects are taking our sort of dry unaffected signal, splitting it off to make a copy of it, then using an LFO or a low frequency oscillator to control a delay time. Well, actually, in the case of all modulation effects, to control some other parameter. In the case of flanger and chorus, it's delaying the second sort of copy that it's made of it, right? And by constantly varying the delay time, it gives these sort of really interesting doubling effects with phase cancellation and whatnot because of the constantly moving waveform that's slightly out of time with the original signal, okay? So with the chorus, usually in comparison to a flanger, the delay times are going to be a little bit longer. And what ends up happening because of that is the frequencies that are affected end up being the lower frequencies, sort of lower than what a flanger would. With the flanger, the low frequency oscillator is going to be varying a delay line again, but it's going to be much, much, much shorter delay lines, possibly 0.5 milliseconds to maybe 8, 9, 10 milliseconds. I don't really know the exact number of the delay on the Gray Flanger. It's not really important, but it's going to be much shorter than that of, let's say, a chorus. Now, there is another thing that we're going to look at with it, that there's an extra sort of parameter that we can, a couple extra parameters actually, that we can use here over a chorus, let's say. But it's going to be pretty interesting to see how these all work together. So that's essentially what's happening. Low frequency oscillator constantly moving this second copy of our original signal around with this delay line. Okay, so let's go over to Pod Go Edit. Actually, I just had the Pod Go hooked up here and ready to go, so I'm using it. It's going to be the same parameters as in the Helix and HX Stomp. So this is a dialing in for all of those. It doesn't have to be just one or the other. So here's what we have. We have rate, width, manual, regen, spread, mix, level, and headroom, okay? Mix, level, and headroom, kind of self-explanatory, right? In that we have those in a lot of our effects. The level is just simply going to be how much volume this puts out. So we're going to be focusing mostly on rate, width, manual, regen, spread, and mix, okay? And actually even mix not so much, just these first 5 parameters. So up here we have the rate. Well, that's going to be the rate that this delay is modulated, okay? Let's say we have a delay range of, 1 millisecond to 3 milliseconds. How fast do we want it to modulate between those 2 points, right? We're going to adjust that with this slider. The width is going to be how wide do we want that delay range to be, right? If we have it set very low, it's going to be very narrow. Maybe, and I'm just throwing numbers out here, these are meaningless other than for example purposes, maybe 1 to 2 milliseconds, right? As we widen it out, maybe it's going to go from 1 millisecond to 6 milliseconds or something along those lines. So it's going to be a much larger amplitude of width movement in the delay line, okay? So the rate is how fast it's going to move between those 2 points, and the width is setting how dramatic, how far apart those 2 points are, I guess we could say, right? Now we say, let's skip down to regen here, because regen is interesting. This is one of those parameters that a chorus pedal will not have. The flanger gives us the unique ability to take the signal that is being processed on that copied line and then feed the already affected signal back to the beginning of that same line to be processed yet again. And it creates this loop of continually processing the signal over and over before it's mixed back in with the direct signal and giving us our final outcome, right? So that's a really interesting feature, and that's going to be an important control to get the flange proper. So it's just regenerating basically the affected signal back through the effect yet again, but mixing that in with our unaffected dry signal, if that makes sense. Now the manual control is basically giving us a way to manually adjust the phase relationship between the direct line and the copied line. What's going to happen here is with the width turned off, the manual control is going to be the most dramatic. We'll hear a big difference. With the width turned up all the way to 10, the manual basically has, from what I can tell, and shouldn't really have any difference, make any difference to the sound at all. There's a good reason for it. If we're already modulating that width very wide amplitude, it's moving in and out of phase already in a very wide range, let's say. So by manually moving the phase as well, and think of the phase like this, we have our direct line here, and if we have no width on at all, let's say we're barely, moving the delay time, we're just going to be able to take that second copy of the original signal and move it. Just delay it a bit. So it's going to kind of move that phase relationship. And think about it again, every signal is a waveform, right? So we have this waveform and we make a copy of it, it lines up perfectly. As soon as we have a waveform here in the same waveform, we move it off, it's out of phase now slightly. So that manual control will allow us to decide how much in and out of phase we want that signal with the original, if that makes sense. I hope that's clear. But if we already have the width really moving that second copy of our original signal a lot, then the manual isn't really going to have much of an effect because the effect is already so dramatic that the manual is not going to have as much of an effect. So if we have our width way up high, the manual control is really not going to do anything. The lower we have it, the more of an effect the manual control will have. Okay, is that pretty clear? The spread is going to be like every other control in the Helix. This is just going to decide how much stereo effect we get, how much it's going to sweep the effect through the speakers left and right. If we want to play this in mono, just turn your spread down. Everything's going to kind of be up the center. For our purposes, I kind of like the sound of it in stereo. So let's do that. Let's put it in stereo and see what we got. So let's start with this. Let's listen to some possible settings on the Gray Flanger. The manual I'm going to keep down, the regen I'm going to keep down right away. And I'm going to set the rate just to about 5, and we'll go with the width at about 5. All I've done here is I have a really quick little placator dirty setting, which sounded really nice with my Fender Elite Tele here. This guitar, I love this guitar, really nice. So this is what it sounds like with rate on 5, width on 5, manual and regen on 0. Almost like a dramatic chorus effect, but kind of affecting the upper frequencies a little bit more. Let's turn the rate all the way up and see what happens. We can hear that oscillator working quickly. Let's turn it all the way down. You see how now it's fluctuating that delay time at a much slower speed. Now with that, if we turn the width all the way up, kind of a nice subtle effect, right? But now if I take the rate all the way back up, it's going to get crazy. might be the effect you want, right? Now, as I was saying here, let's just bring the rate back down to something more reasonable. With that width all the way up, we really hear a warbliness. Now listen to what happens when I bring the manual in. Like I said, the manual control does almost nothing because it's already being modulated so wide that slightly moving the phase that the manual control doesn't really do anything. So if I bring that width all the way down to 0, let's bring our rate all the way up. Actually, let's just bring the width up to something low, but where we really hear it. Now watch what the manual control does. So if we're hearing if we have a low width setting and we're hearing something we don't like, maybe like that's really warbly, right? Obviously we could change the rate on that. It sort of has an unstable sound, so we can manually alter the phase relationship. Watch what happens as I roll the manual in. Right? So we can really alter that if I crank the manual all the way. So with lower width settings, the manual control gives us a way to really fine-tune the way that the flanger sounds. But as I said before, with the width control way up, the manual control really isn't doing much of anything. So let's leave those settings. Let's get to the really interesting part, the regen. As I said, right now it's not really feeding much of the process signal back through itself, but let's crank the regen up to 10 and let's see what effect that has. That's where we start getting that sweeping sound. With it off, we really want to accentuate that kind of sweep. If we go somewhere in the middle, So now with the regen all the way up, we can play with some of the other controls here. Let's get rid of the manual. Bring the width way up, and we'll bring the rate way down. Bring that width down. Okay, I can take some of that warbliness out by rolling that manual control. So I just wanted to show you a few of the neat features we do. I mean, we can do really drastic stuff too. Take that, bring the rate way up. So there I took something extremely dramatic when it was mixed 50% each. Roll it back a bit so you get more of the direct signal. And just a subtle bit of that crazy kind of warbly stuff. Or, you know, conversely go the other way. So lots of crazy things we can do with that once we understand what those parameters all do. I hope I explained that all right. I hope that was clear. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope that helps you with it. The other question too, actually, before I go, is where we should place the flanger before or after distortion, right? So the nice thing about the Podgo and the Helix, we just drag these around. So let's just listen to something dramatic like this. I'll just take this back down 50%. If I was to drag that before the amp distortion, you can hear how it takes on a different quality. And again, it's going to depend on the settings. That's really up to us. I kind of usually prefer my flanger after the distortion, but you know, I don't make the rules, right? It's gonna be whatever works for you once you find the settings that you want. Again, like I said, I hope I explained that well, and I hope that helps some folks. Please like the video and share it with anybody you think would get some use out of it. And please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the little bell notification to get notified when I put new videos out. I really appreciate you guys tuning in and all the support. Thank you guys so much. I will be back soon with some more content. Thanks again. Ciao for now.